On the opposite side of Manchester, the Garcia Dance Studio was buzzing with energy. It was a stark contrast to the calm, traditional atmosphere of the Thompson Academy. Here, music pulsed through the air, loud and lively, a blend of hip-hop, salsa, and modern beats. The building was a modest one, tucked away between rows of busy shops. But inside, it was alive with movement. Ethan Garcia stood at the center of the studio, his body in perfect sync with the rhythm blasting from the speakers. His movements were sharp yet fluid, a masterful blend of styles that seemed to defy the constraints of any single dance form. As he spun and leaped across the room, he could feel the eyes of his students on him, young dancers who looked up to him, not just as a teacher, but as a pioneer. The Garcias were known for their unconventional approach to dance. Ethan's father, Roberto Garcia, had been the one to break away from traditional dance forms and embrace modernity, fusing classical techniques with street style and contemporary movements. Now Ethan was continuing his father's legacy, pushing the boundaries even further, much to the dismay of the older, more traditional studios in Manchester. "Ethan, your footwork is sick, man," one of his students, a teenage boy named Alex, called out as Ethan finished his sequence. Ethan grinned, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Thanks, but it's all about the basics. You've got to nail those first before you can get creative. Let's see what you've got." Alex and the other students eagerly began practicing, trying to replicate Ethan's steps with varying degrees of success. Ethan watched them with a mix of pride and amusement. They were young, hungry to learn, and full of raw potential. It reminded him of himself not too long ago. As the students continued their practice, Ethan's mother, Maria Garcia, appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed and a small smile on her face. She had the same warm, expressive eyes as Ethan, though hers were tinged with a hint of worry. Maria had always supported Ethan's passion for dance, but she knew the weight he carried as the heir to the Garcia studio. "Ethan," she called out over the music, "can we talk for a moment?" Ethan turned off the speakers and nodded to his students. "Take 5, guys." He walked over to his mother, who led him into the small office attached to the studio. The walls were lined with framed photos of past performances, the faces of dancers long gone but never forgotten. In the center was a large portrait of Roberto Garcia, smiling proudly, his arms around a much younger Ethan. Maria sat down behind the desk, her expression more serious now. "You're pushing yourself too hard again." Ethan shrugged, leaning against the wall. "I'm fine, Mom, just getting ready for the championship." Maria sighed, her gaze softening. "I know you're excited about the competition, but Ethan, you need to take care of yourself. Your father did the same thing. He pushed and pushed, always trying to prove something." "I'm not trying to prove anything," Ethan said, though even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't entirely true. "I just want to make sure we win this year." His mother's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that really it, or is this about more than just winning?" Ethan looked away, his jaw tightening. He had never admitted it out loud, but deep down, he knew that his desire to win wasn't just about the championship. It was about proving that the Garcia way, the modern, unorthodox way, was just as valid, if not more so, than the rigid, traditional styles of the other studios, especially the Thompsons. "Look," Ethan said after a moment, "I know you worry about me, but this is what I love, and we're going to win, Mom. I can feel it." Maria smiled faintly, reaching across the desk to take his hand. "I know you will. But just remember, Ethan, dance isn't about winning. It's about expression, about telling a story. Don't lose sight of that." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure if he fully agreed. For him, it was about more than just expression. It was about proving that dance could evolve, that it didn't have to be stuck in the past. The Garcia legacy was about innovation, and he was determined to carry that torch forward. As they finished their conversation, the bell above the studio's front door jingled, and Ethan heard a familiar voice greeting one of the students. He couldn't help but smile as his younger sister, Sophia, bounced into the studio, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a wide grin on her face. "Hey, big bro," she called out, waving at him. "I finished early, so I thought I'd come hang out." Sophia was 15, full of energy and already a talented dancer in her own right. She idolized Ethan, following in his footsteps, not just in dance but in her rebellious spirit. The Garcia siblings shared a close bond, one that had only strengthened after their father's death years ago. Ethan walked over to her, ruffling her hair playfully. "Hey, Squirt, you here to show my students how it's done?" Sophia laughed, swatting his hand away. "You know it." Maria watched them with a smile, but there was still a trace of concern in her eyes. She knew that Ethan's drive, while admirable, could also be his downfall if he wasn't careful. As the day wore on, Ethan continued working with his students, pushing them to refine their techniques while injecting their own style into each movement. But no matter how focused he tried to stay, there was a nagging thought at the back of his mind that he couldn't shake. Lena Thompson, he had seen her dance at the preliminary event, and in that moment, something had shifted inside him. She was everything he had been taught to reject: traditional, precise, a product of the very world he was rebelling against. And yet there was something about her, something in the way she moved, that had captivated him. He hadn't meant to talk to her that night. In fact, he had planned on avoiding her altogether. But fate had a way of stepping in when least expected. Their brief conversation had been polite, guarded even, but there had been an undeniable connection. It was as if they had been drawn together by an invisible thread, bound by a shared understanding of what it meant to carry the weight of a legacy. Ethan shook his head, trying to push the thought away. It was ridiculous. Lena Thompson was the enemy. The Thompsons represented everything he was fighting against, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about her.
As the sun began to set and the studio emptied out, Ethan stood alone in the middle of the floor, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The room was silent now, the energy of the day fading into the quiet of the evening. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt unsure of himself. He had always known exactly what he wanted: to revolutionize dance, to break free from tradition. But now, with Lena in the picture, everything felt more complicated. "Maybe Mom's right," he muttered to himself. "Maybe it's not just about winning." He sighed, running a hand through his dark, tousled hair. Tomorrow would bring another day of practice, another chance to prepare for the championship. But tonight, all he could think about was Lena and the dance they might one day create together. Chapter 2 concludes with Ethan wrestling with his own ambitions and the unexpected pull he feels toward Lena. The world of dance may have divided them, but the connection between them grows stronger, setting the stage for the conflict that lies ahead.